Good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Duhamel. I am the president of Bloom Center for Municipal Education, and I'm really excited about being here with you today to talk about a subject that I think is so critically important to success in municipalities. And it's really important from numerous angles. And when I say numerous angles, we have to understand, and I've talked about this before in my classes, municipal government is extremely complex. We have to deal with political issues. We have to deal with issues with the public. We have to deal with silo challenges because, again, we have so many diverse departments. We have to deal with significant change because we're always in a changing environment working in municipal government. We deal with, again, polarizing issues in municipal government. And what I've seen over many years is that municipalities that really succeed are ones that usually have really great commitments to leadership and ultimately great commitments to great culture. And there's a lot of different attributes of culture that I'm going to talk about a little bit later today that really attributes to this. But I think as leaders, if anybody out there is in a leadership position or aspires to be in a leadership position, you have to commit yourself to learning about and understanding and being able to foster great organizational culture for, again, your municipality to be successful. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. For anybody that's new online today, why is my screen isn't moving? Just be a second here. Stop share. I'll reshare. And there we go. Share. There we go. Odd. Had an issue with moving my slides. Now I'm back on. Everybody knows me, Tim Duhamel. Long story short, if we have any new people online, the thing I guess is the key point is I'm just one of you. I worked in municipal government for many years, and that's really where a lot of the information that I share in my webinars comes from is basically real experience. And so, looking forward to sharing some of that today. Um, what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about four key phases of great organizational culture. One is going to be an introduction to great organizational culture. So, what does organizational culture mean? What are the definitions of organizational culture? Why is it important? And all kinds of other great information I'm going to share in that section. We're then going to talk about leadership and organizational culture because I think this is the crux of the value of great organizational culture is the ability to foster culture, to be able to utilize culture to support basically strategic goals and ultimately support community and organizational well-being with staff and things like that. We're then going to talk about creating and maintaining organizational culture. So how do we actually take steps to create a great culture? How do we foster that culture on an ongoing basis? And how do we maintain it and make sure that we continue to have a great culture? And again, there are always going to be issues with maintaining organizational culture from a leadership perspective. You're always going to go through ebbs and flows when it comes down to culture. We're going to have frustrating moments. We may have issues from a political perspective. There's all kinds of things that can create strains on your culture. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and maybe come up with a few ideas about how you can, as a leader, foster and maintain that great organizational culture over time. And then finally, we're going to talk about practical use of organizational culture. How do I, as a department lead or somebody working in a department as a manager, supervisor, or maybe even the department director, how do I actually implement culture within my area? How do I also integrate organizational culture into my teams and kind of maintain that? And then ultimately, how do I make sure that it takes hold organizationally, that we agree on what organizational culture looks like and what great organizational culture can do for our municipality from a value perspective. And so lots of little tidbits in the last section around that. And so introduction to organizational culture. So what is it? Um, Great organizational culture is really about shared values, norms, practices that guide our employee behavior. And so one of the key things here when we talk about shared values is leadership. It has to be deliberate. And what I mean by deliberate is that when we're looking at something like culture, as leaders, we have to decide what our values as an organization should be. And I believe there should be maybe even a workshop on this where you talk as a leadership team, talk about what kind of values do we want to foster within our organization to see kind of the behaviors follow those values. And so on in relationships again for that leadership model. And so shared values are things you might choose things like ethics, honesty, integrity, caring, innovation, a commitment to service excellence. You may have a number or a list of things that you feel are important, and that should then start to support and help basically control behaviors within an organization. Great organizational culture, again, is about our beliefs, our norms, and practices that guide our employee behavior. And again, it really shapes, in a sense, how we interact with each other. It shapes how we interact with council. It may shape how we interact with the public. Again, it kind of leads our behaviors. And when you start realizing and become good at what organizational culture is, or understanding what it is, and good at implementing and mentoring through organizational culture, it basically really starts to control and basically solicit good behavior in relationship to what we want from a good organizational perspective. And so, again, very important from a behavioral perspective. Great organizational culture is about setting expectations for decision making, accountability, and service delivery. And so, again, when you're starting to think about organizational culture, it's really about ethical decision making. It's about always thinking about what's in the best interest of the public. It might tie to, again, specifics like service excellence or environmental sustainability or financial sustainability. It really, again, controls our behaviors. And one of the things that I really like to consider when we're thinking about great organizational behavior, organizational culture, is when we're thinking about that leadership model and maybe even that strategic model and thinking about, well, what do we want to be when we grow up? What are our goals for our municipality? What does success look like? A lot of it ties to goals and objectives, obviously, about the things that we're going to accomplish, but also ties specifically to how do we actually act together as a team. We're respectful, we have diversity, we have a caring organization, we're committed to excellence, we're responsible. You have a few kind of key things that are important from, again, that organizational culture perspective that helps us reach those strategic goals. And so when you're a great leader, we always, and again, there's a slide, many of you have seen my webinars before, know this slide. Great culture, or for a municipality to be really successful, it means usually great process, and great culture results in, again, a high performing municipality. And so you have to have a commitment to both sides to make things work well. So why organizational culture matters. Um, Great organizational culture definitely influences basically our engagement in terms of how staff feel in terms of their commitment to work and how excited they are and motivated about work on a daily basis. It helps with great retention of staff if you have a really good organizational culture, a caring culture, one that believes in a respectable workplace, believes in innovation, allows mistakes to happen. Basically, we're going to be better at retaining people. And a really big one, basically, if you have great organizational culture, people are usually much more productive. They're more comfortable when they come into work. They feel included. They feel supported. They feel that they're allowed to make mistakes and they're allowed to be innovative. And because of those things, often we're more productive because, again, we're happier at work. A happy employee is usually a very productive employee. And so you want to consider that when you're thinking about fostering good organizational culture. Organizational culture supports alignment with municipal goals and community expectations. And one of the things I mentioned, and I did a webinar last week on strategic planning for elected officials. Um, when we're thinking about culture, again, it goes hand in hand with achievement of goals. Because again, if you have a bad organizational culture, one that is maybe disrespectful, one that is allows for and maybe a bit of lack of productivity. Tons of people just sit around the water cooler all day. People are negative about working with council. Maybe council themselves are negative about working with each other and or the public. The chances of us actually reaching and attaining strategic goals goes down substantially. And so again, great organizational culture, in my opinion, supports alignment with municipal goals and our community expectations. And again, why organizational culture matters is it really enhances our reputation. It helps with public trust and quality of services. Again, if you have a good culture and you have a staff that's engaged, they're working hard because, again, they're motivated through great culture. Basically, our output usually improves. We're committed to getting that snow off the road. We're committed to cutting the grass really well. We're committed to great customer service. And again, so basically, great culture results in great service and great products. So again, very important to consider as we're thinking about the municipal service model. And I apologize if my voice sounds funny because this cold is just killing me. But anyway, so key attributes of a great organizational culture. Usually, municipalities that have great culture are very transparent. They're not hiding anything. And the reason why, again, they're very ethical. They know they do things right. They're willing to admit their mistakes because, again, there's no fear of retribution or challenges from council because, again, council and men have a really good situation from a trust perspective and respect perspective. And so, again, usually transparency and trust among all levels of staff is very prevalent in municipalities that have really good organizational culture. The second one is again, basically great organizational culture means great accountability. And what that means is, the staff show up on time, the staff do their work well, departmental goals get attained because again, we have expectations, we have performance measures, and we work hard to attain them. And essentially, we're not forced to do things. We do things because we want to do things. And that's to me a really great attribute of great organizational culture is people are motivated to again do great work, achieve goals, accomplish again strategic endeavors and whatever it might be because again we're motivated because we love working where we work. And so very, very important from a culture perspective is again our accountability and clear performance expectations. The next one again is again, if you have great organizational culture, we work well together, we collaborate, and this is across departments and teams. And one of the really tough things about working in municipal government is often we have silos. And what I mean by silos, and again, maybe some of you can respect this or experience this. Sometimes departments don't necessarily work well together. Sometimes in municipalities we have competitive environments. We compete for resources. We compete for people. We compete for accolades. And we compete for again projects. We compete for a lot of different things. And when we have great organizational culture, we start to kind of break down those walls. We break down the silos. We recognize that in the end, there's got to be give and take. We have to, celebrate successes of other departments and other people. Collaboration is really something that's a big part of our organizational DNA. And again, usually municipalities that have great collaboration with each other, again, usually achieve a lot together. And so, really important attribute in my opinion. The next one is again, great attribute of great organizational culture or municipalities that have great culture are have great recognition, appreciation for each other, um, professional development support. Again, basically, we think not just of the organization, we think about the individual. And so one of the things that I experienced many years ago working in at Strathcona County with a leader named Christian Jackson. Maybe some of you remember because I often talk about her when I give examples. One of the things that she said to me is that in municipal government, I can't necessarily give you a financial bonus, but what I can give you, because again, we're not private enterprise, we're not for profit, I can give you professional development as a motivator. And it's something I actually quite appreciated over time. There wasn't a course that if I want to go to a course, or if I want to go to a conference, or if we want to do something online, or even if we wanted to bring somebody in to our organization from a speaking perspective, she usually supported that. And she usually worked hard on getting enough budget within her departmental envelope to be able to support the individuals that worked in her department to develop them. And again, that is something that was really motivating to me, and actually, I mean, trickled down to my staff that I was supervising, and again, created great organizational culture and made people feel that they were valued. And so when we start thinking about the individual from a culture perspective, it really ties to recognizing people, supporting them through, again, their development and those types of things. And so to me, it's a big attribute for, again, great organizational culture. And again, great attributes of good organizational culture, and this kind of crosses over again with we encourage learning. And why do we want to encourage learning? Because we want to see innovation, we want to see improvement, we want to be adaptable to the changing world that we face as municipalities. And one of the key things as leaders, you have to recognize is that we're always changing in municipal government. And it might be technological changes, it might be legislative changes, it could be people changes. Oh, again, sorry, this cold's killing me. It can be having to adapt to say things like global warming or political shifts, whatever it might be. We're always in an environment of change, and we need, again, to be good at this, we need to have a commitment to change management. And so, again, like you're looking at, as a leader, your organization itself, you're thinking about, well, do we have a great culture? If you don't have innovation, you don't have people committed to making a difference, you don't have people that are constantly learning and looking to improve, then you have to actually go back to your culture and ask yourself, well, why are people not feeling motivated to do these things? And so I think, again, the encouragement of learning and innovation is a big attribute, again, of great organizational culture, in my opinion. So as we're moving through this, again, on culture in the municipal context. And again, great culture balances political priorities with organizational values. And this is a really important thing to understand, again, as a municipal leader. One of the things that we have challenges with as an administration is basically the interpretation of political issues into administrative language so that our staff can understand what's expected of us from a performance management perspective, if there's changing expectations from a council perspective, and also the whys behind political shifts and or political disagreements or polarization. And the more that we can basically balance political priorities and the things that council wants with our organizational values and organizational expectations, then we can become very good at, again, the council administration relationship. Absolutely key and important in my mind to success for municipalities. And so understanding the basically having some political acumen to understand politics and understand how to make sure that we can kind of calm the waters from an administrative perspective is absolutely key to, again, maintaining good organizational culture. Here's the thing. Councils are always going to at times, and thankfully so, disagree with each other. There's going to be always times in municipal government when politics becomes difficult and even becomes confusing for administrators and for staff because, again, we're doing a good job. I mean, 90% of what we do is pretty automatic. We clear snow, we cut grass, we do those types of things. But often, what really bubbles to the top in terms of exposure to the public is really polarizing political issues. And the more leaders can understand this from a cultural perspective, understand the impact that politics has on culture and calms those waters, it really does make an impact on your ability to perform and for your municipality to have, again, strong performance. And so something to consider. One of the key things from culture is understanding roles and responsibilities from an elected official perspective. I'm about to do a bunch of council orientations coming up here in Alberta because the election's here in 5 days, 6 days. And so the role of elected officials, the role of chief administrative officers and staff in shaping our future is absolutely critically important. So again, and why this is important again is it could be um, kind of, it's frustrating for administration when council gets into what we call the proverbial weeds. So they want to teach us how to cut the grass, or they have comments about our ability to fill potholes, or those types of things. And so they kind of get out of their lane. Equally important and frustrating for council is when we're not responsive to their strategic goals or their requests for information or improvements in our service performance. And so understanding basically the roles and keeping council in their lane and keeping administrative in their lane, but also having a strong basically pillar of respect for each other and a really strong ability to communicate with each other about kind of the roles and responsibilities is absolutely key to maintaining great organizational culture. Um, when I worked in Strathcona County and again in the city of Spruce Grove with Doug Legore, the one thing I noted about Bill Sutherland, who was the SAO in Strathcona County, and Doug Legore, who was the SAO in Spruce Grove, is that they were fantastic at managing basically the expectations of council. They're actually great at managing council's expectations from a explaining to administration in terms of what council needed from a performance perspective, and they were really Doug was really great at explaining to council basically the challenges we had administration in meeting their expectations. And so again, culture and the roles and responsibilities was always clear, and communication in terms of challenge was always really well served by Doug in relationship to, again, that communication aspect between council and administration. So really important to understand. Great culture means great relationships between council and administration, in my opinion. Another component is culture is a really important tool for building trust and credibility with our public. And so if we are committed to great organizational culture, We're again usually really committed to transparency. We're committed to ethical behavior. We're committed to developing policy that meets expectations of council and adhering to those policies very strictly. We're really good at, again, getting communication out and being very respectful of what our public may need in terms of like understanding issues from, again, a political perspective or service level perspective, where it might be. And the more committed we are to those types of things, the more we build up a relationship with our public. I'm a believer, and maybe some would disagree with this on that. On the most part, I believe that the public actually are very reasonable and that they trust administration and they trust council as they elected them to basically take care of the interest of the public on the whole. And when we believe in that and then we take action to make sure that we foster that through good communication, through good behaviors, through the way we deliver services, I believe that our relationship with our public really, really improves. And I will say this, I've been working in this business for a long time. There are municipalities that have a very, very um, harmonious relationship with their public, and that means that their budget processes become much easier. Asking for tax increases becomes much easier. Challenges with projects and explaining them becomes much more appreciated and respected from the public. And the reason why is, again, is that commitment to great organizational culture. And so, again, has a really big impact in the municipal context, in my opinion. Okay. Um, Now, when we're thinking about organizational culture, we have to think about the levels of organizational culture in municipal government. Again, obviously, we have council, and this is where basically, in my opinion, great organizational culture begins. Is if you have a council that's really committed to great leadership, they're committed to strategic goals. They have a fundamental understanding that to attain goals and to be successful, they also have to be committed to great organizational culture. And that means basically being committed to leadership. And so, you know, councils will set vision, they'll set the tone for the municipality, they'll also set expectations through the sale of administration. And usually great councils, in my opinion, are very positive in their approach to in this way. And so something to consider. The second component of, again, levels of organizational culture in a municipality is, again, operational. So again, the sale and management translating strategy into practice. And so again, great culture and the commitment culture from a sale perspective means I'm going to listen to council direction. I'm going to make a commitment to understanding their strategic goals, and I'm going to be able to interpret that into administrative language that results in operational action. So nothing frustrates a council more, in my opinion, than when they set expectations of administration and then they see nothing get done and they don't perceive any improvements. Councils do not get elected, or individuals do not actually run for office on the premise that I'm running to change nothing at all. Again, elected officials typically, and again, I'm very thankful to this, run on the premise I'm here to improve things. I'm here to hold administration accountable. I'm here to see changes in our municipality that will result in value for the residents in the short term and over the long term. And because of that, we have to commit as administrations to interpreting council's direction into language and actions that can make a difference. And when you do that, again, it really fosters great culture and the relationship between council and administration. That will filter then into departmental culture again as we're kind of moving down from council to the sale and now into departments. Departmental culture means having good team dynamics, having basically norms like how we behave with each other, how we treat each other, and again practices that are usually tied to good policy, respectful workplace policy, policies that ties to uses of equipment or whatever it might be, uses of procurement, whatever, and those types of things, very, very important. And so we have to recognize that department culture has to again flow down from again council culture, sale culture, but it has to take hold for us to actually again to be able to perform well. So again, great aspect of overall organizational culture is being committed to departmental culture. And then finally, we have to consider the individual. And the individual, when we're thinking about organizational culture, has to commit themselves to the behavior and being engaged and being accountable in relationship to what we expect from a culture and organizational behavior perspective. And so The key thing, and the reason why I really want to put this slide together, is that having a commitment to organizational culture without having a commitment to making sure that everybody understands what culture means and what's expected from culture, um, it breaks down. The leadership doesn't work. It doesn't really impact anything. And so just talking about good organizational culture is not enough. What we need is basically a commitment to having it understood at the council level, the CEO level, the department level, and then ultimately the individual level. And we have that shared understanding of what good organizational culture means, then it really, in my mind, fuels success. It really gets people marching kind of to the same tune. It gets people on the bus together. And again, so when you're really thinking about leading and starting to foster and implement organizational culture, understand it comes basically down to four levels. And you should have, whether it's in your orientations or whether it's in your strategic planning sessions, you should have conversations with council about what good organizational culture actually looks like and what it can result in from an excellence perspective in the municipality. Now, how does culture impact outcomes? Basically, it enhances, again, decision making and problem solving. It improves conflict resolution, staff morale, and cohesion. It drives innovation. Essentially, culture does a lot of good things. Um, Again, if we have good organizational culture, usually we have people that are willing to make decisions because they're not fearful of making a wrong decision if there's a mistake. Usually, if we have good organizational culture, we're better decision makers because our culture basically enables us to be more committed to evidence-based decision making. We're willing to do the homework and make a commitment to understanding our jobs better so that we become better decision makers. And so very, very important from a culture perspective. Again, and a big one in my mind is improves conflict resolution. Good organizational culture usually means good leadership and good commitments to understanding conflict, understanding how to overcome conflict, understanding, and training our staff in terms of like how to deal with conflict on a daily basis and a long-term basis. And conflict can be individual, conflict can be between departments, conflict can be between administration and council, conflict can be between the administration or the organization and the public. And so when we start to recognize these conflict issues and we become better at overcoming them, again, our culture really supports, again, basically solutions when it comes down to conflict issues. And again, I've already talked about innovation, responsiveness, and organizational resilience. Again, really important from a culture impact perspective. And so, um, overall, that's a lot about organizational culture. And now we're going to move on to leadership and culture and how it works. So when we're starting to think about, again, culture and leadership, as I mentioned before, leaders essentially establish norms through their behaviors, their communication, and their decisions. And so when you're a leader in a municipality, basically you are somebody who is an example. You walk the talk. So you're setting the tone for what's expected through your communication, through identifying your expectations, by talking about your vision for basically departments or individuals. Basically, we're really becoming good at taking a snapshot of council's vision and interpreting into administrative language. And so, again, great leaders establish norms through their behaviors, their communication, and their decisions. Leadership through culture can definitely affect your style, and will affect staff morale, engagement, and collaboration. And so leaders that are committed to good organizational culture usually are committed to basically a productive and positive leadership style, which means that we're not going to be overbearing, we're not micromanaging, we don't deal with anger, we don't deal or lead with anger. We're caring, we're committed to people. It usually really guides our behaviors. And so when we're thinking about, our leadership style and we're thinking about our leadership development, uh, making a commitment to culture and making that part of our leadership style is a really important component of basically the behaviors that we're going to show to our staff in, again, the short and the long term, and it will make a significant difference. And then culture is reinforced by both formal and informal decisions. So again, sometimes we'll make decisions in terms of like what's expected around policies. We'll make formal decisions in terms of staffing decisions. We'll make formal decisions in terms of procedures and things like that. in terms of behaviors. We'll also take informal actions in terms of how we treat each other during the day. Coming into the morning and saying hello to people. I once had an employee who um, actually told me in a performance appraisal process that I was taking her through, that it made her somewhat uncomfortable when I came in the mornings and I didn't say hello in the morning. And she said it just makes me uncomfortable and thinks makes me think that you're not, you don't care, or maybe I did something wrong. And I realized over time that just a simple hello and showing friendliness to people on a daily basis really made a difference in terms of how they felt. And so what she taught me that day is that I always had to be thinking about culture. How was I actually impacting culture through my behaviors? If I had a bad day, maybe I mentioned this before from a leadership perspective. Sometimes maybe I should go in and have a closed door policy where I'm not going to allow my frustrations to be seen by my staff because it may affect them in an adverse way. And so culture is reinforced by, again, formal decisions, but it's also basically reinforced by our informal actions and our behaviors during the day. So something to consider, again, as leaders. Now, our role of elected officials in culture, and I think this is an incredibly important consideration. To me, elected officials set the tone for culture and organizations. The elected officials are the true leaders of our organization. And I think sometimes we're not very good at fostering that as administrators. And one of the things I believe that is the solution to what we call dysfunction in today's municipal government, the solution to bad council administration relationships. The solution to maybe even poor performance, or maybe polarizing issues that we have from a municipal perspective, is basically for administration to understand the role of council and to foster that role through supporting them and supporting their leadership. And supporting council's leadership is really, in a sense, supporting good organizational culture. And so the role of an elected official from a cultural perspective is to, again, define the vision of that, what we have for the community. So what are we going to be when we grow up? Or do we want to be stronger from a recreation perspective? Do we want to be stronger from a infrastructure sustainability perspective? Do we want our services to improve? Do we want to be better from a economic development perspective? Whatever it might be, we have to understand council's vision, because again, it's going to tie to culture in some way, shape, or form. We understand council's values. What do they value as a group? What do they expect of staff? They expect ethical behavior. They expect us to be accountable. They expect us to perform well and to be efficient and effective. What is it they think that's important? And then ultimately, they're going to define basically what our priorities are. And once they've done that, it sets the tone for basically behaviors and actions that we should be taking on as administrators. Councils also set the expectations for, again, ethical behavior, for transparency and accountability. And again, they influence both internal culture and public perception. And so great counselors will be very good at working with their SAO and respecting their SAO, and then letting the SAO know that their expectations are as that behavior and the way that they're treating the SAO gets filtered down into the staff. And then we see positive actions that are making us achieve our strategic goals, our vision for the community, whatever it might be. And so the role of elected officials, in my mind, is incredibly important. One story I've told before, many of you maybe have heard this, but again, I'll just say it again. I can still remember many years ago, Bill Sutherland, who was the SAO of Strathcona County, he was at the front of the stage one day, and he had this projector that he was running on. It was on the screen, and we had a bunch of staff, maybe 400 or 500 in Festival Place, which is again an auditorium in Shore Park, and he was talking about strategic goals. And once he was done identifying what those strategic goals, he actually asked council to stand up at the front of the row. They stood up and he said, "These are the leaders of our organization and our community, and they're the ones who developed these strategic goals for us to try to attain as an administration." And what I thought later is that was a very powerful leadership moment. It actually made us understand that there was going to be a healthy respect between council and administration, and that we were basically now actioned in terms of staff in attaining the goals that Bill had actually put up on the screen that day. And I thought it really, helped motivate me as an individual and as a staff person in relationship to how I felt about council and how I felt about their leadership. And in the years that Bill was the CEO, I'll say this, there was always, in my opinion, a very healthy respect between council and administration. And I found that very motivating. And I felt it really helped, I think, our culture overall as an organization. And so the role of elected officials should never be underestimated in terms of that impact or their impact on great organizational culture and ultimately leadership within the organization. Then we have the role of the CAO. Now, the role of the CAO is to translate council's vision into operational plans. And so, what I mean by that is that great CAOs will listen to council's vision for the community, understand what leadership looks like, understand what a strategic plan is intended to do, and they'll be able to interpret that into administrative language so that we can actually action things to help support council's goals and their vision for the community. It Sales are there to align staff behavior and departmental goals with municipal strategy. So their job is to again ensure that staff behavior is aligned with what we're trying to achieve. That the staff work hard, that we're accountable, that we have good performance measures in place to know that we're doing well if we're trying to achieve certain goals from an action behavior in terms of the department. And again, it's all aligned with municipal strategy. And then ultimately, the role of the chief administrative officer is to again serve as a bridge between council and staff. And so, from a cultural perspective, sometimes the SAO will act as, for lack of a better way of putting it, act as a bit of um, a referee or somebody who is there to bridge challenges between council and administration. Sometimes councils get frustrated with staff. Sometimes councils get frustrated with the lack of achievement of their strategic goals, and the CAO is there to help bridge that gap in relationship to calming council, and listening to their issues or whatever they may have with staff, and then either explaining the reasons why maybe staff aren't achieving what council sees as important, and or working with staff to maybe better their performance or improve things so that council's goals do get achieved. And so there's a delicate balance that has to be achieved when the sale is working between a council and staff, but one that it's very important, a very important role. And again, it really ties to great organizational culture. And the key thing I think that sales should really work hard at achieving is again making council and administration harmonious in relationship to the way that they feel about each other and the way that they work together, and understanding that the more that we can get councils to understand that they truly are our leaders and we respect them as those leaders, and they set the tone for culture and they set the tone for leadership within an organization, I think solicits good behavior. Because again, common sense wise, when council feels that okay, we are the leaders, and our behaviors are important, well, then if we act in a dysfunctional way, then it's going to have a very bad effect on the culture of the organization and our ability to achieve things. And so, really, really important role for SAO is to make council understand that and help support them in their leadership role. The role of the executive team, again, so we have the SAO who's there to interpret things into administrative language. Well, then we have basically our municipal executives, and this can be in a larger organization, the roles of GMs. In small organizations, maybe it's department directors, and maybe it's all direct reports to the SAO. But in the end, culture has to be fostered through the organization, through people for it to work. Leadership, again, and this is a big problem I have with leadership training in today's world, is often we spend a lot of time training our leaders, but we don't spend time treating the people that are to be led. And that to me is a big mistake. And so the key thing about creating and fostering great organizational culture is identifying at the high level, council and the sale, what organizational culture we expect and what good organizational culture should look like, and then making sure it filters down into the organization through people. And so the role of executive team is to, again, shape team norms, develop a collaborative attitude, and make good decisions and foster good decision making, and making sure that they understand what good culture looks like at that council level, and make sure that their staff understand what good culture looks like. The role of executive team is to reinforce values, to again help from basically hiring processes, from evaluation process, recognize and mentor people from again a good culture perspective. And so again, they're there to be again kind of more hands-on in relationship to working with their staff and their managers in terms of supporting them and reinforcing values. And then ultimately, the role of executive team and directors is to maintain alignment and to look at the organizational objectives and make sure that staff are engaged. And so again, it's kind of a proactive job in relationship to saying, okay, this is what good culture looks like. This is the behaviors we expect. Um, I'm going to measure those behaviors. I'm going to correct behaviors if they're not being met, and I'm going to make sure that my staff understand this is the expectations within the organization. So that is the role of the executives. Leadership behaviors that again in my mind build good culture, and again I'm sorry if I'm not on my best today because of this bad cold, but I'm feeling really a little bit out of it right now with all the contact seed that I took. But anyway, leadership behaviors that build culture. So again, what kind of behaviors build culture and are attributes of good looking culture? Open, transparent communication and approachability is important. If I work in an organization and I feel that I'm heard, if I feel that my boss has an open door policy, I can tell them about the challenges I'm faced with. We have good communication between departments. We have good communication with our council. We have good communication with our public. That's usually, again, the types of behaviors that will build on good organizational culture. We are open to working with each other and we're willing to talk things through and communicate well. Consistent and fair decision making is important, and this is to me really key and critical. If I work in an organization where decision making is suspect, where maybe people play favorites, our leaders play favorites in the way that they make decisions. Decisions aren't well justified, or they're made very quickly without a lot of background and thought. I'm going to be discouraged as an employee. I'm going to maybe believe a little bit less in my leaders because I don't trust their decisions. And so key key to culture and a key link to leadership is again having consistent and fair decision making on a always as you're making decisions as a leader. I think is absolutely critically and important. The next one I think that helps behaviors that build culture is again encouraging innovation, encouraging collaboration, and encouraging shared ownership. I think this is very important. If I work in an organization where I'm allowed to improve things, I'm encouraged to do research. I'm encouraged to take risk and maybe change things that will result in improvements. That's engaging to me. I mean, that makes me kind of excited and interested in my job because again, it's very self-fulfilling to make some changes and see improvements in what we do. So again, encouraging innovation and collaboration to me is a really key thing that you want to make sure that you foster and you encourage in your organization. Um, and then another one that basically behavior that builds culture is again recognizing and celebrating staff contributions. And so the more that we can recognize that people are doing well, the more that we recognize that and look at achievements as they're completed, and we again provide that encouragement, whether it be just one-on-one or we actually celebrate successes together as teams. It really helps to build on culture. People that make go the extra mile, make efforts to improve things, make efforts to research or do their homework or develop themselves, and then have it celebrated. It encourages them to do more and encourages them to continue with those behaviors in terms of improvements. And so everybody feels good to have a pat on the back once in a while. And so recognizing and celebrating staff contributions to me is a really important aspect when it comes down to a leadership behavior and building culture. If anybody has any comments or questions as I'm going through this, feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A function, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that you may have as I'm going through the content today. So here's some leadership pitfalls that can harm organizational culture. Again, as I mentioned before, favoritism. To me, this is one of the worst ones. If you have leaders that obviously favor people or favor work groups, maybe even favor members of council, whatever it might be. Again, this can be very discouraging and can be what I call a culture killer. If we have inconsistent expectations, and so I've set the bar of where I expect you to be, where I expect your performance, and once you've met that bar, I've got, no, that wasn't good enough. I wanted to go higher now. Um, Basically, or my deadlines are changing consistently, or my expectations of behavior are changing, or maybe my expectations of behavior are different with you than somebody else. Well, that's very discouraging to me as an individual because again, I've come in and I'm discouraged because one, I don't know what my expectations are, and I don't know maybe or maybe I'm misunderstanding why some people are treated differently than me, even though I'm performing just as high as they are. And so that can be very discouraging. So you want to make sure they're aware of that. Unclear guidance can be another one that's very discouraging and difficult on staff. Again, I like to know what you expect of me. I like to know what's expected of my job. And I want to know kind of like, what do I need to achieve to be able to achieve what would be considered high performance from a performance management perspective. Lack of follow through on commitments can be very discouraging. So somebody who says I'm going to do something, or we're going to have maybe team meetings on issues, and then doesn't come through, can be very discouraging. One of the ones that I've seen myself that I've heard of individuals being very discouraged by is when you do a staff survey and you ask for people's opinions on things, whether it be, do you feel encouraged? Do you feel you're well led and things like that? And then staff fill in the survey and it goes nowhere. It's never reacted to. It's never actioned. There's never any kind of, basically communication back in terms of we heard you. This is what we're going to do about it. Those are the kinds of things that can be very discouraging. And so a lack of follow through on commitments can be very discouraging, and it can really harm culture in the short and the long term. Again, or ignoring feedback or staff concerns. I just mentioned that can be a big one. Again, staff when they are able to be courageous enough to come to you with an issue or something that they think is being done wrong, or maybe even concerns about your leadership. Um, Not taking it seriously or just not acting on it can be very challenging from a culture perspective. People then feel that, well, there's no point in maybe even staying working here because again, I'm not listened to, I'm not valued, and some of the behaviors that I feel are maybe negative to our performance, they're not willing to change. And so those are the kinds of things that can really harm culture in the short and the long term. And again, allowing department silos or poor communication persist is a big one in our world. You want to make sure that you're somebody who builds bridges. You're somebody who overcomes silos. You're somebody who is seen as willing to work together. If you have that type of attitude as a leader, then usually staff will be very encouraged and they're willing to actually emulate the behaviors that you are showing as well. And so again, culture is catchy, for lack of a better way of putting it. If you're willing to commit to great culture, and willing to commit to changing your behaviors and willing to support again people through the way that you behave with them and encourage them and celebrate their successes, then typically they'll emulate those behaviors and they'll improve themselves in terms of the way that they're actually leading to. So very important to consider. So consider pitfalls when you're thinking about again your leadership model. um, Very important to consider when you're thinking about culture is reflection and discussion. So I have a couple of questions for you. If you want to answer them in the chat, great. If not, just answer them for yourselves. Which leadership behaviors in your municipality support or hinder culture? I'd love to hear from them, and I'd love to paraphrase them if you want to put a few things in. And then the second thing is, what can leaders do to strengthen organizational culture? And so, what could you do as a leader to basically strengthen organizational culture within your work group or within your organization itself? And now, creating and maintaining organizational culture. And so, how do we create and maintain great organizational culture? So, if I'm beginning out, I want to basically understand and define what's our clear organizational values. What do we feel is important? And again, you want to be clear on these things. Do we value accountability? Do we value transparency? Do we value ethics? Do we value respectful workplace? Do we value service excellence? You kind of want to have a good idea about what those values are. And the reason why you want to identify what those values are as a leader is that you want to then, if you're creating culture, then be able to communicate that down into the organization, right down to the lowest level person that works for the municipality. If you can, define great organizational culture, it gives you that foundation for changing behaviors, for setting expectations in terms of how we act and work with each other, for creating kind of a leadership mantra for providing value and providing motivation for people. And so defining your organizational values, basically that mission and that vision, to me is absolutely key and critical to creating the beginnings of great organizational culture. The second component is probably, in my mind, one of the most important parts is basically communicating expectation consistently across all levels of the organization. Defining great values, making a commitment to great organizational culture, identifying what we expect from a behavioral perspective, identifying how we're going to work well with each other and what kinds of things we're going to do to basically solicit good behaviors. It's not enough. You have to basically make a commitment to communicating this information at all levels of the organization. And that means, again, and I kind of put it into the other slides, you want to make sure that you have those communication and those discussions at the council level. You want to make sure that you have them at the SAO council level, the SAO executive team level, and the executive team management and staff level. You want to make sure that the information and the discussions filter down from the council level right down into the grassroots of the organization. That is when you have what's truly called a shared understanding of values and a shared understanding of organizational culture. And the more we can kind of articulate and communicate what good organizational culture looks like, the more that basically our behaviors from a staffing perspective will begin to emulate what that looks like. Very, very critical and important. We also need to align our policies, our procedures, and our performance management with culture. A very, very important aspect here as well. I forgot to close my door, so I have, I apologize. My director of health and wellness came to see me. Okay, go lay down. Sorry about that. Um, One of the things that we want to make sure that we think about when we're creating a great organizational culture is we want to make sure we communicate our align policies, procedures, and performance management again with good culture. So we have again a great vision of what we want to achieve as an organization. We articulate what culture means in terms of supporting that. Now we want to maybe put pen to paper in terms of talking about actual policies and procedures and actions that will make sure that good culture takes hold. And so respectful workplace policy is one I often talk about. Policy in terms of maybe the council SAO covenant in terms of behaviors with each other. Code of ethics from a council perspective really ties well and supports good organizational culture. Having a code of ethics for staff that offsets the code of ethics for council, I think is really important. Here's the thing: I'm a big believer that good organizational culture is an overall commitment. And what I mean by that is that if you have things like code of ethics for councils, you should have a code of ethics for staff that basically complements it. And so there's expectations from both sides in terms of behaviors and actions that need to be taken if we have bad culture. And so really key and important is, again, good policies, procedures, and performance management, in my opinion. And again, we want to make sure as leaders that we also look at recognizing and rewarding behaviors and aligning those things with, again, cultural values. And so, again, as I said before, it's not enough just to state what good organizational culture is. We have to make sure we make an effort in aligning those behaviors and reinforcing those behaviors by again, recognizing, you did a good job. I appreciate, your willingness to collaborate with other departments. We are showing an obvious commitment to fair decision making around budget within an organization or fair decision making around promotions, whatever it might be. We're making sure that we're aligning basically our values with our cultural values and making sure we walk the talk, that we're actually taking action on the things that we say are important from a cultural perspective. And so again, this is an important aspect of as leaders in terms of creating that great organizational culture. Tools and strategies to foster culture. Again, here's the kinds of things that you can use, in my opinion, that will help support great organizational culture. You'll have staff engagement and surveys and feedback loops. And so again, a staff survey to begin and ask staff, how do you feel about organizational culture? Do you feel supported? Do you feel that we allow innovation? Do you feel that you work in a trusting environment? Do you feel that we work in an ethical environment? Having a staff survey can be a great start to good culture because it identifies where you stand. What's your current state from a cultural perspective? The next one can be cross-department team building and joint initiatives. So getting people together. And this is one that I personally believe is very, very important. If you're going to make a commitment to great leadership, you're going to make a commitment to great strategic planning, leadership, and then ultimately culture, you want to make sure that you get departments together to talk about it. I just did a leadership course in the city of Coquitlam, and some of them may be online today. Hi, good to see you guys, by the way. Um, and one of the key things that they did that I thought was brilliant is they allowed managers to come from all different departments. And so by the time we finished the leadership course, I believe that there was a better shared understanding of what good leadership looked like, a better shared understanding of how they maybe should behave with each other, and maybe a shared understanding of how they should maybe have their staff work with each other. And so by doing cross-departmental team building and joint initiatives, what you start to foster is a shared understanding of what good culture looks like. And that's the secret sauce to success is that shared understanding. So getting people together and having conversations about what good culture looks like, I think is very important to success in culture building. Um, um, Thank you, Nadine. Somebody just said, I love that your cat and dog joined your webinars and put a smiley face on there. Thank you. I appreciate it. It feels somewhat unprofessional to me, but sometimes I forget to close my door. So my she's my health and wellness vice president. I call her Bloomer. She's laying right beside me. So thanks for the comment, Nadine. I appreciate it. Um, Now, getting back to culture, again, leadership check-ins, monitoring, and transparent reporting is important. Here's the thing. If you're going to be a leader in a municipality, you got to have your thumbprint on the heart of the organization. And what I mean by that is you can't be disconnected from the people. I mean, that's what leadership is all about. And so you want to have check-ins. Ask your department directors, how do you feel culture is going in the organization? Do we have conflict? Do people feel encouraged? Do they feel that they're do you think their staff are motivated to do their jobs on a daily basis as well? If they're not, what are we doing wrong? And so having leadership check-ins with at the CEO level with directors, directors with management, management with staff, staff with each other. I think you should do culture check-ins at least maybe once every quarter or more, basically to make sure things are working well. Because again, great culture and a commitment to culture is really the foundation to succeeding for municipalities. It helps us with innovation, helps us with performance, helps us with our council relationship. It really is to me the secret sauce. And so leadership check-ins, monitoring, and transparent reporting about our culture to me is a really important aspect of culture of growing culture. And again, you might commit to things like recognition programs, professional development, and growth opportunities. And so making sure that your staff feel engaged, feel supported, feel valued. You bring people in for training and for workshops, things like that, and you support their growth opportunities. You allow people to grow. Those are the kinds of things to me that make people feel this is a place that I want to work. This is what makes me feel motivated about getting up in the morning and going to work. Is again an organization that supported to my growth and my abilities to achieve things from a performance development perspective or whatever it might be. And so there's just a few tools and strategies to foster culture. So again, if any of you have any additional ideas about fostering great culture, I'd love to hear them. So moving on. So again, when we're leaders, we're going to have challenges when it comes down to developing and maintaining good organizational culture. And so one of the key things that can help overcome those challenges is having good onboarding opportunities. And so when we bring on new staff, we want to make sure that we integrate culture and our expectations about culture in our onboarding processes. And so if you're having new staff come online, you want to have something that talks to them about here's our organizational values. Here's our policies that tie to our organizational values. And basically, here's our expectations in terms of how we behave with each other. And to me, I think a behavioral expectation a document I think is key to great organizational culture. So it's not just about values, but it's like we are expected to treat each other with respect. We expect each other to be open and transparent with each other. We expect to be fair with each other. Having some information and documentation to that effect, I think, is really key to success in fostering culture. And again, if you want to maintain your culture, you got to get the new people that come online to actually tie into and buy into the culture that you've fostered over time. Regular review of policies, I think, is important. Are our policies still aligned with what we want to achieve from a cultural perspective? Again, are they still aligned with our values, whatever it might be? You want to make sure that your policies are consistently updated and they still tie to what you would consider positive organizational culture and basically cultural expectations. You want to basically address misalignment proactively and constructively. And here's the thing, that's a fancy way for saying we want to basically deal with the people that are cultural killers. And all kidding aside, and this is maybe a difficult part of the conversation, um, is you're going to have individuals on occasion that, in my opinion, aren't aligned with good organizational culture. You're going to have people that don't cooperate well. You're going to have sometimes people that maybe act unethically. You're going to have people that occasionally, will not collaborate with other departments and are competitive. And when you have those types of situations, you want to make sure that you have the intestinal fortitude as leaders to be able to recognize who those individuals are and then make the efforts to performance manage and correct them. And that is, in my opinion, not just good for the organization, but that's good for the individuals themselves that are culture killers. Because in the long term, people that are culture killers and are negative usually will end up with performance management issues, end up with conflict with other individuals, and end up, needing to be corrected. And so the more proactive you can be to support those people and help them to understand why their behaviors are not acceptable or why they need to commit to good organizational culture, to me, is one of the keys to maintaining culture and challenges. To me, there's nothing worse than a leader and an organization that is committed to great organizational culture but shies away from basically corrections and performance management and taking care of sometimes some of the difficult conversations that need to be had with individuals. Um, you have to commit to it as a leader. If you're going to commit to culture and leadership, you have to commit to sometimes doing the hard work and doing the uncomfortable work. And this is where, again, we deal with misalignments with culture. The next one, again, we want to do, and this is one that I always liked because, again, I'm a big celebrating kind of a person. I believe that we want to make sure that we celebrate successes and recognize progress publicly, and that means it may be just simply in a staff meeting with people that are all together and say, oh, by the way, somebody did a good job and was able to meet these deadlines. It might be departmentally. We recognize departments for actually achieving maybe a huge goal. Dealing with a disaster, dealing with a large capital project that got completed, whatever it might be. Those are the kinds of things that might be important from a celebration perspective. But I think the key thing here is to recognize people. And on occasion, and don't underestimate this one, on occasion, the most important recognition that we can give somebody in terms of celebrating successes is simply a one-on-one. As a supervisor, a manager, as a director, or maybe even as a CEO, reaching out to staff and saying, by the way, I noticed that you did a really good job on this thing, and I want to thank you for the work that you did. That can really really make people feel good, can really, solidify their commitment to, their performance, and make them feel really committed to the organization. It's just simply those one-on-ones and saying, hey, I noticed that you did a good job. I think it can make a big difference for culture overall. And maybe sets the tone for them in the relationship that they'll react with their staff. Maybe if it's somebody that's your direct report, they might be more apt to, again, emulating your behaviors by again making the effort to thank and recognize their staff for good performance if you're willing to do it for them. So something to consider. Using culture to resolve conflict is a big one. Obviously, one of the big issues we have in any organization is conflict. At my peak as a leader, I was in charge or I led about 200 individuals at my peak when I was a GM. Um, but I'll say this, the most difficult job I had is from a conflict perspective is when I had my first supervisory role and I managed two people. And the reason why is they didn't get along with each other. And so I had to learn a lot at the very beginnings of my supervisory career. I had to make a real effort to learn how to overcome conflict. And so using culture oh, to resolve conflict, I apologize again, the cold's getting to me a little bit. Using culture to resolve conflict is really important. And again, what this means is making sure that your staff understand that again, what shared values mean, what our expectations around behaviors, and how do we expect, we'll overcome disputes with each other. Using culture encourages respectful dialogue, good mediation and constructive feedback. And again, one of the things that I had to do sometimes with the two staff that I had challenges with, I had to bring them into a room together and I'd lay out the ground rules. we're not going to raise our voices today. We're not going to show frustration with each other. We want to get down to the bottom of what's the underlying issues, and we want to work together through this. And I'm here to listen to your issues together. And so state your issues, and then I'm going to kind of give you my take on it. I may not make a decision today. Be careful about making decisions too quickly when you hear things at first, because again, you want to reflect on things a little bit. But I always made sure that it was considered we need to be respectful and need to be listened to. One of the key things, I'll just mention here that can help overcome conflict very quickly, and is the notion that people just simply want to be heard. You want to make sure that you recognize that. One of the keys to overcoming conflict, overcoming staff frustration, overcoming basically dislike of people with each other sometimes is just simply the willingness to listen and hear their concerns. Sometimes that really reduces the stress very quickly in people, and they can overcome their problems on their own just as long as they've been heard. And so make sure you encourage respectful dialogue, encourage communication and respect, and be a boss who deals with things proactively. I think that's one of the more important parts from a culture perspective. And again, I think culture to resolve conflict is really embedded in supporting consistent performance management and accountability. And so having a commitment to understanding performance measures, understanding the performance management process, understanding performance appraisals and how to use them very constructively, positively for improving performance management. If you have performance appraisals that result in a lot of negativity and basically calling people out for basically their mistakes, then I think you're using performance management in the wrong way. Performance management is not a performance appraisal at the end of the year in a written document. Performance appraisal and performance management is about noticing and supporting basically improvement throughout the year. If you notice mistakes have happened, deal with them right away. If you notice behaviors that are negative or not in alignment with cultural values, you want to deal with them right away. But not just deal with them in terms of reprimanding people, but I mean in terms of dealing with them and providing them with positive support in terms of becoming better. I had obviously performance management issues in my career over 30 years. There was little things here and there. And the best bosses I had always came to me and said, I noticed, this behavioral issue, or I noticed that you're not making your deadlines, or I noticed that, this was done incorrectly, or whatever it might be. But they also gave me the encouragement and support to get better. Those are the types of bosses that I would walk through a wall for, because again, it made me better. It made me become better at what I did as an employee. And so you want to make sure that as leaders, when you're looking at culture, you're looking at great performance management and encouraging positive performance management, in my opinion. Very important, in my opinion, on culture. Again, enhancing staff motivation through culture is very important. So again, this is again communicating our purpose, our mission, and the relevance of each role. One of the things that helps support good culture is making sure that people understand they're valuable. They're important. The work they do is critical to again us achieving goals as a municipality. Maybe it's a customer service rep. Maybe it's somebody who processes utility bills during the day. Maybe it's somebody who works in accounts payable or accounts receivable. Maybe it's somebody who is cutting the grass. Whatever it is, in some way, shape, or form, they contribute very much to the quality of life of the residents that live in our communities. And so we want to make sure they understand the value of their positions. And so the more that you can make people feel encouraged by supporting them through understanding the value of their positions, the more commitment you'll get to, again, positive organizational culture, in my opinion. We also want to make sure that we recognize rewards and achievements through contributions. We talked about that already. And again, we want to provide opportunities for growth and involvement in decision making. And this is maybe one of the big ones. People who feel empowered usually feel very encouraged and feel maybe more committed to good organizational culture. They feel more committed to their jobs. They feel more included because they're part of the decision making process. That makes people feel again valued and supported. And so looking for opportunities for growing people and maybe and involving them in decisions, I think is really key. People who work in basically very, very top down organizations, meaning like basically, all decisions are made at the top. there's no opportunity for input or feedback or involvement in the decision-making process, usually people feel very discouraged and maybe even fearful of decisions that are made at the top. And so by involving people in the decision-making process, and I know that we can't involve people in all decisions, but allowing some input and feedback, I think it again helps really foster positive organizational culture overall, my opinion. Okay. Um, One of the keys to overcoming silos and departmental barriers is again promoting interdepartmental collaboration and shared projects. Hello again, go me down. That's important. And aligning goals across departments to build teamwork is important. And implementing transparency, knowledge sharing, and collaborative tools is important. And the reason I bring this up is I believe, again, at least in the municipalities I worked in, that silos and departmental challenges working with each other can become a big problem. And the more that we can align people in understanding that everybody's important, maybe we have priorities that maybe focus more on some areas than others, depending on what council wants and depending on what the public wants from an importance perspective. That's the reality of our world. But it doesn't mean that not everybody isn't important. And so the more that you can encourage this understanding that everybody has an important role, that we respect each other very much, that we work well and we collaborate, I think it goes a long ways in supporting, again, overall culture. And I'm just going to maybe just leave you with this as leaders. One of the things you have to understand as leaders is the reason why often we have interdepartmental challenges and conflict is because of different values. And when I'm not talking about the values like ethics and performance measures and those types of things. I'm talking about values in terms of a recreation director will value things like health and wellness. A firefighter will value safety. A land use planner will value, again, positive growth and again, sustainable growth. A finance director will value financial sustainability. And so they'll value things that are important to the work that they do. And sometimes those things conflict a little bit with each other. And by understanding that as leaders, that's when we can overcome, in my opinion, many of the challenges we have from a silo perspective. We have to recognize those challenges and those value differences to get people to work well together. And again, make a commitment to understanding the different values the departments have, and then make an effort, in my opinion, to overcoming them through, again, good work from a departmental collaboration perspective, team meetings, recognizing shared values and making a commitment at the director and manager level. It's a must do that we are willing to collaborate and work well with each other. If you can do that, you'll go a long ways in overcoming, again, silos and departmental barriers. And again, here's the reflection on this section. We're coming down to the last section. What immediate actions can strengthen the culture in your municipality? So if you want to write a few things down or give me some ideas, I'll paraphrase them. And how can culture help address your current organizational challenges? And so 2 questions for you to consider after the webinar. And if you want to put some answers into the chat, I'd be happy to address them. Okay. Now, last section. So department culture and organizational integration. So how are we going to actually practically make this thing happen? And so when we're thinking about our departmental culture, again, we have to consider these are like microcultures within, there's microcultures within an organization. Again, I kind of mentioned a fire department is very different than a planning department. A planning department is very different than the recreation department. Recreation is very different than the assessment and tax department. Again, we have to recognize that departments have their own microcultures, and this will affect collaboration and their performance. And so we want to recognize that we do have differences, but also recognize as leaders, we have to kind of make sure that we commit to our kind of overall global culture mantra. What are the key values that we want to actually foster? What are the key behaviors that we are going to expect from each other? And what are the key things that we need to do from a recognition perspective to allow fairness and equity within our organization? So we want to make sure that we recognize that departments are different, but we have to find ways of bringing them together to, again, support good overall organizational culture. Again, when we're thinking about departmental culture, we want to make sure that we shape team norms, expectations, and engagement. How do we work together? What's our expectations of departments and work groups, and how do we make sure that we engage well and understand what good culture looks like? And again, we want to make sure this is very important that as we start to foster culture in our departments, in our own work groups, that we're still make sure that we're committed to aligning with our broader municipal organizational culture. That as a work group, we're committed to innovation. As a work group, we're committed to working well together. But we're also committed to, as a work group, to working well with other departments. We're committed to um, understanding our leaders. We're committed to good behaviors that help support our elected officials, and we're certainly committed to great culture that supports a respect for the public overall. That to me is absolutely critical and important. Is that we foster our culture internally with our small work groups, but we also make sure that we do a checkpoint in terms of how our culture is expected to make us behave from an external perspective. Again, council, public, whatever it might be. Breaking down silos again, and this can be even within our own departments. Again, we want to encourage collaboration across departments, but we also want to make sure we encourage collaboration among individuals. And so we want to break down silos, not just departmentally, but even in our own work groups. Sometimes we have individuals that don't work too well together. We have, certain compartments within a department maybe they don't work well together. We want to make sure that we break those things down. Sometimes we can have cross-functional committees to get people working together. We can have task forces. And again, we want to make sure that we reward behavior for, again, collaborating and working well together. I can't stress enough. Leadership is always about thinking about the global big picture, but it's also about learning and understanding it comes down to the individual as well. And so, as much as we talk about breaking down silos from a departmental perspective or maybe a functional perspective between council and administration, we also have to break down silos between individuals because sometimes individuals just don't work well together. They have different personal values. They have different cultural values. They have different expectations around work performance, and sometimes that makes conflict occur. And so we have to commit as leaders to overcoming those silos and individual silos. Moving on, culture and staff performance, again, very important. If we want to, again, make this practical, we want to make sure that we have a commitment to good organizational culture within our performance management and our performance, basically performance expectations. And so we're going to identify clear expectations and what those values mean. And so when we're doing performance appraisals for people, we're going to start the performance appraisal, at least I hope you do, at the beginning, not at the end of the appraisal period. But we're going to sit down with people and talk about what their expectations are from a performance perspective. But we should also have a section of our performance appraisal process. We'll also talk about what we expect from a cultural perspective, how you treat people, how you lead people, how you interact with others, how you act ethically, responsibly, your accountability, whatever it might be. We want to actually have some cultural expectations, and then we'll have performance expectations. And you want to make sure both of those are in your performance management documentation and processes. Okay. We want to engage our staff, and we want to make sure that satisfaction improves performance consistently. So we want to have constant check-ins. Again, your performance appraisal process should not be something that you deal with just once a year at the end of the year. Performance management should be an ongoing process. And performance management isn't just about correcting, it's also about encouraging and celebrating successes. And so if you have really high performers, spend your time with them as well. Because again, too often we spend all of our time with our poor performance to try to correct performance when we should also be spending time encouraging our high performance by saying, good job, well done. What can I do to encourage you to do better? What can I do to maybe help support your growth and your performance as a high performer? Make sure you focus on your high performers as well. And again, always look through as we're developing our culture, our staff performance, encourage again innovation, initiative, and ownership of work. And so again, accountability and celebrating successes when people can innovate and improve. Organizations that culturally are committed to improvement are usually the municipalities that really succeed in my mind. And I'll say this, there are municipalities out there that have a lot more success than others. And a lot of that is can be attributed to, again, a real commitment to good organizational culture and improvement. And so something that you definitely have to consider. Okay. Um, As we go through this, culture and employee motivation is very important. So this includes recognition and respect to and this should basically increase your engagement and your commitment to people. You want to provide development opportunities and meaningful contributions, and shared vision strengthens pride, purpose, and team cohesion. And so again, when you're thinking about culture, you got to be thinking about how am I going to use culture to motivate? How are we going to get culture to encourage people? How are we going to, get culture to create pride within our organization or maybe even in our overall municipality. And so culture is really key. There's some municipalities that are very, very focused on community pride. And when you drive into some municipalities, you can tell the grass is well manicured. There's flower pots, hanging on the fence posts. They have park benches, beautiful trails. Their facilities are incredibly well maintained. You have community groups that are willing to volunteer to help support some of these endeavors. That is basically a community that has a lot of community pride, and it usually ties down to great community culture overall in terms of working groups. And so when we're really focused on good culture, it really shows. So something to consider when you're focusing again on implementing culture. Again, using culture to navigate challenges. We're always challenged in municipal government, as I've talked about before. When we look at culture, again, our shared values can support overcoming conflict. It can help resolve conflict constructively. Again, great culture can help enable coaching and feedback in daily practices. So again, as I mentioned before, if I'm really focused and committed to good culture, I'm probably going to be very committed and focused on good coaching and providing feedback. And so culture makes us basically involved and engaged on a daily basis as leaders. And then finally, great culture will build resilience and will help our political and operational pressures. So if we have good culture, usually what we have, again, a really good and healthy respect for council, and council has a really good and healthy respect for us. And so when things go wrong, usually it doesn't mean that there's going to be a negative relationship issue with council. There's just simply going to be positive conversations in terms of what we could have done better, what we need to do and improve. And again, maybe even admitting mistakes to council is important. And so using culture to navigate challenges and focusing on relationships, in my mind, again, is really key to success in this endeavor. So culture and using culture to navigate challenges to me is a really strong and important tool. Final reflection and action planning. And I apologize for really rambling through this, but again, normally I'm really well prepared, but today I'm very sick. Here's my final reflections. Again, identify one culture initiative to implement immediately. And so if we want to really think about improving our culture, what can you do as a leader today that's going to maybe change something in your group tomorrow? And so what can we do right now that would be practical that would help support culture? And here's an easy one. Bring your team in for a quick meeting or take them out for lunch and just talk about, hey, how do we feel about our culture? Are we doing well? By just having an open conversation about culture, you're creating the ground roots and planting seeds in terms of improving your culture. And so again, just bring people in and talk about it. That's to me the first proactive issue or first proactive thing that you can do to start basically fostering great culture. The second one, define measurable outcomes and a timeline for review. And so what I want to do maybe is I want to take a piece of paper and I will talk about identifying basically our values if we don't have them. And if we do have them, I want to take our values and maybe I want to turn it into basically what's our behavioral expectations that ties to values and what types of things do I want and when are we going to basically be able to have a discussion about this. And so I'm going to create a timeline where I'm going to take our values, turn it into measurable actions, maybe look at our policies and our procedures, and then I'm going to maybe have a team meeting about our culture and talk about how are we doing? Are we actually doing well? Again, that would be something that to me would be measurable. The next one maybe be encourage and follow-up discussion and accountability. And to me, I believe this is one that's really important is encourage follow-up and discussion and accountability. To me, great culture, I really do believe this is one that allows for culture to be discussed and allows culture to be challenged and allows culture to be celebrated. And what I mean is basically encourage discussion and accountability. And if people aren't behaving in ways that tie to what we feel is basically our shared understanding of values and good culture, then we should have procedures and processes in place that deals with it. Again, having the ability to deal with difficult conversations, or saying, you know what, your behavior wasn't aligned with how we treat each other, or you know, your behavior isn't aligned with fair decision making, or whatever it might be. I think encouraging an openness to talking about these things together, I think is very important to good culture. And so what do you think? Would you agree with that? I think those are the types of things that we need to do well. And so with that, I made it. So, and thanks, Shania, for saying I don't have to apologize for being sick, because I did not want to um delay this webinar. I've been doing that too much lately, and I have to apologize for that too. I've kind of tired myself out a bit with a bit of too much work, but so I want to make sure I got this one done. So thank you for the kind words, Shania. Um, any thoughts or comments on culture? What do you think? What can you do to help solicit or help foster great organizational culture in your organizations? And did you find this webinar useful for your use from a leadership perspective? And so I'll sit here and ask if there's any questions, and I don't see anything coming up or any comments. I'll just leave you with this. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I got just yesterday, I hit 7,800 followers on LinkedIn. I read lots of articles and I provide a lot of free stuff on LinkedIn. So if you'd like, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you. I'll register on our website if you haven't registered before. Many of you probably already are registered on our website, but again, lots of free stuff on our website and a lot of new exciting announcements coming up on our new material that I'm going to be providing here shortly. Question just came up. Can I get a copy of the slide presentation? Shannon, yes, I always provide a PDF of the presentation. Unfortunately, I meant to do that this morning and just got a little bit caught up in taking cold medication. And so I will send a PDF out to everybody about the presentation probably tomorrow, if that's okay. So you will get a copy of the slides. Any other comments or questions before I sign off? Thank you. You're welcome. Oh, here's going once, going twice. Not seeing any questions. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time for today. And from me and from Bloomer, we wanted to say thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Bye for now.